the former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating once said that Australia needed to find its security in Asia rather than from Asia. And I sometimes wonder whether that's Europe's issue too. It needs to find its security in Eurasia rather than from Eurasia. But perhaps we can discuss some of the meanings of that today. But I wonder if perhaps we just start off with some of your reflections on the Munich Security Dialogue, because you gave a speech at a protest outside the event over the weekend. What were your reflections on, where Europe is standing at the moment in the world?
Well, many thanks for getting us started with the Munich Security Conference. I have, several developments in my life, and in former types of my life, I was actually a member of the Munich Security Conference. So I was there between 2007 and 2013 in the function of the office. I was director of the Office of the European Council on Foreign Relations. And having said this, I realized already by then that the system is sort of, how could I say it, driving nuts. Yeah, I mean, you could basically smell it was the banking crisis, how Europe couldn't get together, how it was militarizing, how opinion was shifted. I mean, you could basically detect in these early years that something is happening. And for those who listen to this talk, there is also a report that you can find in the internet, and it's by the way, by an Australian author, Andrew Löwenthal, and he wrote a censorship report about Germany, repression and regression in Germany. And you find this on www.liber-net.org. And it's very interesting because this report shows that by 2016, so basically 3 years after I left the system, if you want so, because of Trump 16, of Brexit, the figures of, let's call it hijacking the media, basically raised dramatically. So all this money that was spent on NGOs to keep discourse coalition and to keep to basically make restrictions of free opinion. So state money that was spent on so-called democracy promotion, but democracy promotion like this is basically the erosion of democracy, because you want to keep one narrative. And you can see in the figures that this is like this star rising 2016 onwards. So all this to say that my experience of the Munich Security Conference being in the Bayerische Hof goes back to before 2013. And since a couple of years, I'm doing the demonstrations against the Munich Security Conference because this is in essence what happened. The time I was in, the system could have critiques within. You could be critical, and so the system had self-correctiveness. You could say this is not good. We are doing this. The system should basically balance itself. So criticism was allowed, and it was taken serious. And I think what happened since quite a time in all Europe, and the data point to it. The data I just gave you in this censorship report point to the fact that criticism within is no longer allowed, and so that the system is losing self-correctiveness. Because that's what critique is for, and this is why you could see in this Munich setting last weekend, you could see Mr. Merz, and then Kaja Kallas, the High Representative, and then Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, and then Ursula von der Leyen, who basically had a warmongering speech as if it were, tape in, literally, look at the body language, You see Mrs. von der Leyen, who is a very sort of slim person, tall, slim. She was there, tapping on the table nearly with aggression, sort of, we will defend Ukraine until blah, blah, blah. And so there was a very, rough language and no reflection that perhaps, what everybody knows, look at what is happening really in Ukraine, look at the at what we hear from the military, I mean, this war is basically ended since more than a year. Yeah, I mean, the only problem it can't be ended is that the West, I mean, the European countries have no face-keeping or face-saving solution, because we basically had a narrative that we need to win this war, to have a military victory, and so on and so forth. And Putin can't win, because if Putin wins, then he would colonize all Europe, and all this sort of ideological talk. And we can't remove from this talk. So there is a real problem of face-keeping in Europe now. And this is why this war is going on and on, with 1,000 soldiers dying per day. Yesterday, I looked it up, it was 1,090 Ukrainian young men who died again. So all this to say that the official talk of the Munich Security Conference seems in a total cognitive disconnect from reality. Yeah, there is no I mean, looking at what is happening militarily, but there is no real, listening what the Russians are actually saying. I mean, Lavrov, for instance, had a lot of speeches, offered a non-aggression treaty. So what, to leave a war other than with a non-aggression treaty? You could say, okay, that's an interesting idea. Let's look at it and sign it. Yeah. So, I mean, coming back to Munich, apparently there is a cognitive dissonance by European elites. And in addition, you mentioned Mario Rubio. Last year when the Trump administration came in November 24, and then last year Munich was February 25, there was J.D. Vance saying that in Europe we have a problem with free opinion. And I said, okay, this US administration may fix things in terms of, also with COVID, Robert Kennedy, and then free opinion, and then Russia. So there might be sort of things from this administration we can in Europe welcome and say, look, there is an opening, right? I wouldn't say this year any longer, obviously, because in the last year we have seen Gaza, we have seen Israel, we have seen Iran, we have seen Venezuela, we have seen Greenland, all this totally unacceptable, abuse of international law, and a superpower like the US basically doing into the right of the strong, overstretching the military, basically talking in hemispheres that are theirs, like Venezuela, Greenland, so totally unacceptable. But if in addition, because last year, Marco Rubio, I sort of liked his speech, or at least I was sort of curious, right? This year, you read a speech, you hear a speech, I read it, in which basically he is celebrating colonialism, 500 years since Columbus, basically takes World War II as the unfortunate end of Western colonialism. And you feel like, look, I mean, what is this? Can I say it again? Yeah, you celebrate colonialism, and you take World War II with 60 million deaf people, 27 out of which Soviet citizens, 6 million Jews. You take this as the unfortunate end of Western civilization and colonialism, and you feel like, what is this administration about? What is it about in real political terms, but what it is about in intellectual sort of historical terms? Because the analysis, if you take this speech like one-to-one by the letter, you would say Marco Rubio would like to embrace a new phase of Western colonialism. And that is, unfortunately, in his opinion, not happening because the Europeans are refusing it. That's basically in very short, undercomplex, the speech. And then you say, this is not possible. I mean, we are living in the 21st century. We are having the French Revolution in 1789. We are having liberté, égalité, fraternité. So we are, from French Revolution, we worked to the United Nations. We codified in the United Nations first sentence that all people, all men is free and born equal in dignity and rights, first sentence of the UN Declaration. We are in a post-colonial science environment where a lot of studies, post-colonial studies, are done, at least in European faculties. We are preparing for a multipolar order, BRICS countries emerging with 1.6 billion Indians, where today the AI summit is basically happening, with
right.
1.4 billion Chinese, with Europe being 500 million citizens. Yeah. And Marco Rubio basically insults the Europeans that we are unfortunately not helping the US to continue Western imperialism. So this feels like middle-age rhetoric. And I'm in a way, I'm sorry for the US administration that the intellectual depth of the administration, because I like the US. I worked there. I was in New York, in Washington. I traveled US up and down. I have many American friends, and it's baffling to see this. Yeah. So if this is the Munich Security Conference, last sentence, then this is just dead end talk. It is dead end talk from the US side and from the European side. If you ask me, we now have an hour to develop what should
From your experience working from the inside there at Munich, I mean, what would be your read of the way in which the various European officials have reacted? I mean, like I used to be a government official for 30 years, so I'm very used to the idea that what's said in public isn't not necessarily what is thought in private or behind, closed doors. But how do you see the broad European, leadership class, let's say, responding to this sort of idea that Western civilization is one and it's led by the USA? Moral crusade against the rest of the world.
Well, you are right. I also experienced in my, official years time of professionality until basically 2013. Then I shifted into free thinking world, basically. And I have my own little NGO and my own little activism. But yes, you're right that elites, let's say, or political professionals, functional elites, are having an outside discourse to shape opinion, but then prepare things and have strategic capacity. Yeah, I experienced it that way, basically until 2013, and I said that there were real changes which we can detect empirically by 2016 when the system was spoiled. Yeah, I mean, really huge interferences, buying public support with all this state democracy promotion money and so. I would say the system is toxic, and the system is closing around itself, and the system is interfered. The data point to this. We also know that, for instance, X and Twitter is moderated, that we have moderated algorithms, and moderated algorithms are shifting populations to certain sort of discourses, and narratives, and you don't go against. So this is basically evidence today. But the problem is that the elite reflects sort of, this is outside the opinion, but we are doing this. It seems to be not separated. What I feel in Berlin also when I'm talking to, I'm going, what I hear, for instance, that in ministries, when in the foreign ministry, for instance, there's a talk about Ukraine and we must send weapons and blah, blah, blah. I have good friends who sometimes feed me with information. And recently a friend told me, what is happening when this is presented by the state secretary, we must go with Ukraine, stand with Ukraine. Nobody of the civil servants is standing up just with the question saying, are we sure that we have the right analysis? Are we sure that we have a right analysis? Because then you could come in and say, look, the data of what is happening military is perhaps this and that, and perhaps we should change strategy. But the pressure, the conformist pressure is really shocking in Germany. And conformist pressure works with fear because, people who don't know me, but I'm a political scientist. I worked as professor at University of Bonn, and I was literally fired for writing 2 books. Yeah, in 2002, I wrote a book about the COVID measures, a critical book, and I wrote a book about the history of the Ukraine war. And basically, immediately after, I was pushed away from university. I'm still in a lawsuit, but it's an unusual behavior for a democracy, right? Yeah. So, and people...
You're basically unfair. I mean, if I can express from the legal safety of Australia, you were basically unfairly dismissed because you expressed a different opinion on foreign policy and health policy within your country, which is, appalling.
The more important thing is I was not the only one. We are 60 professors in Germany. It's 60 professors. There is, by the way, a book. Yeah, what's in it's on Amazon in English. It's canceling the university. No, the title is I will find you this. You can put it disrupting the university. That's the title. Yeah, and it's an empirical study about the 60 cases in the Federal Republic of Germany since 2020 that have been basically pushed out of universities like me. So coming back to this, because people were watching this, because I'm a little bit known in Germany. Yeah, so people see, oh, this is happening if I say this. That means that conformism and pressure has been increasing. And so now, if you are a state official, if you are a professor, if you are whatever, a journalist, you know that you better don't go there. Yeah. And this is on COVID, on Gaza, on Ukraine, on climate, on migration, on wokeness. Yeah. There are some of these hot, toxic discourses. And society has learned that there are borderlines of where you better don't go. Yeah. And you asked me about, that was your question. There's the public discourse, and this is what the elites are doing and shaping. Yeah. But because of conformism, this is why I took the long loop. Because of this pressure and conformism, even in the ministries, even in the schools, even in the faculties, there is no more basically free analysis and out of the box thinking. And if there is no out of the box thinking, and the people in the ministries are not asking the questions, do we have the right analysis, then you don't come to different conclusions. And I must say that I can judge it for Berlin because I'm living in Berlin and I'm well connected. I think I can judge it also for, Brussels and for Paris, because I'm, teaching in France. My kids are living in Paris. So Brussels is even worse. Brussels today is, in the best Beatles sense, a yellow submarine. Yeah, I don't know. You're living in Australia. I don't know how many Australians have been to Brussels, but you imagine a very nice town, by the way. Art Deco and very nice. There is a yellow submarine, which is this EU sort of town, like the Commission Center, Berlaymont, and the Council, all this EU complex, super giant complex, all glass, skyscrapers, with thousands and 10,000s of officials who walk into the building in the morning, see the same papers, read the same narrative, go out, drink a beer in an Irish pub, talk about the same things, and then you come and say, okay, are you sure you have the right analysis? And they look at you like an alien, because they just don't hear. They don't hear that other people think differently about this. And it's a shame.